Suburban Kings. What's up?
Hey, buddy.
Spring is in the air.
It is full swing.
Which means
spring.
summer's in the air in Austin.
It's getting there. I mean, it's right now. It's kind of cloudy and wanting to rain, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, the temperatures are rising for sure, more consistently. But the rain is interrupting things, which we need it. So bring it on.
Yeah. Now we might hit 80 tomorrow in Portland. So, I'm gonna be out there getting a sunburn.
Yeah, buddy.
Got my first bee sting of the season last week.
Oh, dang. What happened? Were you just chilling and walking?
Riding my bike. I get stung by bees when I ride my bike. And, I've probably, I've been riding bikes out on the road for going on 38 years. I can count on one hand the amount of times prior to moving to the Pacific Northwest I've been stung by bees. I guess we just have a healthier ecosystem here for bees. And last year, I even started counting. I got stung 7 times last spring and summer by bees. Most of them in the head. They stick into your helmet and then sting you in the head. And then I think I got to figure it out. But I think as I get older, I'm becoming less. My body's dealing with the bee stings. It doesn't do as well. Last year I got stung in the head twice on the same ride. Went in there, stung me. It feels like you're like getting burned by a hot poker for a second, and you're kind of you're good. And then a second time, same spot, another bee got in there a couple hours later. And then a couple days later, a typical person wouldn't notice it. They couldn't see the swelling because there's swelling up there. I could feel it, but then it kind of moves down my head, down by my ear, and I could see it as kind of my glasses interacted with the side of my head and the way things were. I'm like, I got swelling. You could see it just kind of move down. Like, that was weird. I never really had a bee sting bother me, more than just the next day. Just itchy. And then I had one sting me in between my toes. I was playing volleyball in grass barefoot.
Oh, dang.
And one got me right between the toes. And that kind of made my foot swell up a little bit the next day on a bike ride. Not enough to where like I could tell the difference, but it was just annoying. And then this last week, it stung me. Like it hit my helmet and then bounced down, and its butt hit me like in the arm and stung me there. It hurts for a minute, but then like it started swelling. I got like a man boob for a day or two. Yeah, like it swelled down my chest and down my arm. It was bizarre.
Now you have a little empathy on how I've spent the better part of my life.
Are you allergic or?
No, I'm just talking about the man boob part. Like,
yeah. So I had my first man boob. Got to trial it just on one side. Not a fan. One star.
Dude, that's crazy. I guess you just like riding through swarms and they're kind of just sticking, or they chasing you down?
You ride out in the country, that's where, there's lots of farms and natural stuff, lots of flowers and things like that, and there's just more bees.
They're there.
And you're just moving through air. And it's like, I mean, he didn't hit me. I'm sure he doesn't view it that way. They probably feel like more like, what happened? Something came out and killed my brother Hank. They have a different point of view on it, but
yeah. So I mean, the honeybees or the that type of bee up in the Northwest, I'm sure much more abundant. Down here, we're dealing with more so those red wasps, those dirt daubers.
Yeah, you got mud daubers and things like that. They don't really sting you. Or
yellow jackets, when they do, they'll let you know they're there. I got hit by one of those last summer. There was going by a porta potty, and I call their bluff when they're flying around. I just whatever, and I go get ready. Porta potty is already a terrible experience as it is, and then get hit by a dirt dauber.
Let's just get in and out.
It's like, golly.
Awesome. No, yeah. So bee sting. So I keep track. That's the first bee sting of the year. We'll see. I think I was 5. I think I was 7 last year. 6 of them were on the bike. One playing volleyball at the park. So,
dang.
I guess we have a healthy ecosystem out here in the Pacific Northwest. It's beautiful, So now I think I'm going to have to take a Benadryl after I get stung by a bee,
right?
Just to calm things down. I don't know.
Jeez.
But there you go. So, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. You ever watch the show like they do in Inductees? They do a big concert. That used to be an event. I used to watch that.
Yeah, I was going to say used to. I remember maybe back when we were on staff together, there was 1 or 2 I was catching, and it's been a while. It's been a long while. So I don't know. It's not really on my radar, but this is awesome. I want to hear about it.
Right. So Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, it's in Cleveland, right? It looks like the Louvre. It's like a glass pyramid kind of thing. And I'm trying to look. I'm looking on the website for the date of the actual ceremony of the inductees for this year. So they announced the nominees in February, and they announced the inductees this week. So, it was a bit, I don't know how they vote. I'm not going to go dig into the details of who gets to vote and that sort of thing. But the nominees are on here. So you had, it's kind of a mix of things. It's a pretty broad spectrum. Bad Company, so classic rock. The Black Crowes, retro classic rock. I don't know, kind of just Southern rock.
Yeah.
Mariah Carey, pop. Chubby Checker. In his day, that would have been considered rock and roll. But kind of pop. Joe Cocker, poppy rock. Billy Idol. There. Surprised he's not in already. That's a surprise.
Yeah.
Joy Division / New Order. Interesting they're putting them together. It makes sense because their lead man died right after the Joy Division album. One of those albums that's like, it's like the movie Citizen Kane, where it's like, it's important. You should watch it. But I think it's overhyped as to how good it is. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Just simple music, maybe that might, I'll probably piss some people off. I'm not talking bad about Joy Division. Like, I get it.
Yeah.
Cyndi Lauper, also surprised she's not in there.
Yeah.
Mana, there's like a tilde over the A, so I don't know how.
Manya? I don't know.
Not familiar.
No.
Oasis.
Oh,
interesting.
whoa.
Oasis.
Okay.
Outcast.
That's cool.
Fish
getting a jam band nod.
Soundgarden.
Oh man.
And the White Stripes.
Soundgarden's way too far down the list though. That needs to be
when you
higher
think of all these other people,
true.
They broke
Legacy.
out, and I think their first album would have been 89 or 90.
Right.
All these other bands had albums prior to that. Mariah Carey, maybe not, but and of course the White Stripes not, but all the other ones were around longer. Okay, so Oasis in 90s. So old and new, mix in there, pop and rock. Then the actual winners here: Bad Company, Chubby Checker, Joe Cocker, Cyndi Lauper, Outkast, Soundgarden, and the White Stripes will be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame this year, whenever that is. It's usually a cool show, right? It'll be, these bands will be sitting up in the balcony. These groups will be sitting up in the balcony, and different artists will perform their stuff, and that's always pretty cool, right? Like to see other people perform renditions on their things. But what are your take on some of these bands? Okay, obviously, Soundgarden you liked.
Yeah, I'm getting stuck somewhere here with this. So I just remember riding in my dad's vehicle with them, and he would put on the classic rock, and so classic rock, even backing up before that, but there's just a little bit of a disconnect. It was a little bit of like a force feed. Like, okay, we're going to put this on, and I like it because my dad likes it. It means something to me because it means something to my dad. There's context there.
Classic
that
rock
exists
as a genre.
with him. So this is what I'm getting to.
Okay.
So as I'm looking at this, I'm feeling probably a little bit like maybe the way my dad felt. Like this means this list of names, I guess, first of all, it's making me feel old, but
right.
These bands mean something. So if I'm going to go turn on, which my kids probably have heard, a handful of these because, they've been in the rotation. Like at what point does this become the classic, quote unquote, the classic rock? Because like when you go to the radio station, there's a classic rock channel. But when you go to the alternative radio station, it needs to be classic rock now because they're playing classic rock because they're playing music from when I was in high school.
Thought that.
What's going on here? How did that get stuck like that?
I thought that, and I've kind of gone back and forth between the two points of view. One is, does the age of it simply make it classic rock, right? So
right.
We were calling it classic rock probably by the mid to late 80s, definitely in the 90s. So let's say 70s and 60s is that era of quote unquote classic rock.
Yeah.
And so you're talking, let's say 1990 to 79 to 60. So music that's 12 years old, 15 years old, 20 years old, is that what makes it classic rock? And it is rock, I would argue that it's guitar centric. Or is classic rock a genre and it was the music like disco, or it came out during a time period like grunge? And that's kind of where I am now. Like if a band came out and sounded like early 90s grunge, I wouldn't call it grunge because grunge was not only a sound but a time period.
Yeah, right.
And that's so I don't want to turn on the classic rock station and hear Pearl Jam. To be clear, I don't want to turn the classic rock station at all. So that's where I am. But I get what you're saying, right? Should it be classic rock? But I'm fine with saying,
these are
grunge,
the classics.
90s rock. Glam rock was a period and a sound, right? Yeah. You could argue that The Darkness, who's playing here in Portland, I think next week, The Darkness is glam rock, although they're from the 2010s,
right?
Yeah. But I would call that like retro glam rock, which is even to say, like, we just saw that Black Crowes was on the nominees. I kind of call them like retro classic rock. They have a classic rock sound and look, but their first album dropped in '89.
Yeah,
or '90. Was that Shake Your Moneymaker? Great album.
Yeah, part of that feeling though is like there's a point in time, a generation of music that reaches an audience and it stays with them. Then the next generations come around. So that time in that context to me is like the classics, and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is like included amongst the important, people who push the needle forward, or they push the art, they elevate it, they create something new, they're breaking the boundaries. So like I hear what you're saying, like the classic rock being a genre, which to me that's just weird, like because they defined, I guess that's why it's classic rock. They were the up and comers that really brought rock.
It was rock and roll at the time.
Rock and roll, yeah.
Well, that's the thing. It's I think you've seen the poster, like the music family tree, right? Chubby Checker was considered rock and roll. So was Elvis, right?
Right, yeah.
And so those kind of guys were the early parts of it. So what do you call that now? It was popular. It's
the Foo Fighters are rock and roll to me. Like they might be one of the torch carriers through the disconnect of rock and roll. They bared that and carried it. And to me, like they've really, even though they're kind of pop around the edges and they're overplayed, they're just true rock and roll to me. And so it's like, but now they should be included in classic rock because they're old, and that music landed in our time when we were up and coming. So it's just weird. So I was processing all that whenever this list came up. So
yeah, well, it's classic. At the end of the day, I think when we had Josh Kemble on when I was interviewing him, it's the same thing. The label doesn't matter. Do you like it? We want to defy labels, and it's kind of one of the reasons behind what we do on the podcast here is we want to expose ourselves to all kinds of music and like what we like because we like it, not because it fits into a box. But generally, I fall on the side of classic rock is a sound. It is a genre, and in at least in part a period of time when that type of music was being released.
Yeah.
And anything that sounds like that now, like we said, like a Black Crowes or like a Greta Van Vliet, is like a retro classic rock, I would say, where it's new and they're just kind of playing an old sound, and that's cool, but so classic,
I think the Black Keys have a little bit of a hint,
absolutely,
of a classic rock.
Yeah. Just a retro band is what I kind of call them.
Yeah.
And even when if you ever seen Band of Horses live, they took a picture of them. If I took a picture of them and put it next to a poster of any band from the 70s that was touring, it looked just like them.
You just slip a picture of them into the lineup of one of the festivals back in the day, and they're just there. Openers.
So the aesthetic goes beyond just the sound. It can be the look of it. So I love just the blurring of that. And to your point, I love that our kids have access to everything. Your kids are now in that age where. Have they ever played something for you that surprised you because it was old music from your era or before, and all of a sudden they've put this on in the car, and you're like, "Oh, that's how'd you get into that?"
Yeah, and I think part of it really has to do with it being attached to their algorithm of videos that come through. So like there was that Linger Cranberries remake by some emo dude, and that got, they grabbed my phone. I'll play a song. They put it on. I'm like, this is okay. Linger Cranberries remake. Okay, cool. All right. Well, that came back around unexpectedly.
Yeah, no, I see that covers have it. The other one where I see something similar to that is one of my kids will put on, a hip hop song that's utilizing a sample.
Yeah, right.
Or a melody, and I'll be like, "Hey,
wait a minute,
I know that sample," and after the song's over, I'll go play, where the sample came from, and it might be 90s, 80s music, and I think that's cool. Like,
what's that one song? Girls Are Players Too. It's got like that P Diddy and Big hypnotize loop. Girls Are Players Too. I don't.
Yeah.
That got a lot of airplay, and that sample. I was like, this isn't the song. They did it, and I'm sure Big and Diddy got that from some obscure record that they sampled, but
and Doechii, her hit, which is just blowing up, like every other TikTok has as the backing track. Her anxiety song is Godier.
Yeah,
it's just straight backing melody. So it's a cover basically with different words and a little bit different song.
Yeah,
great song.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's another conversation. Godier, man, that guy came in, dropped an album, and then just fucked off to space or something. Where'd he go?
Disappeared.
Didn't care. Yeah, it's kind of like the presidents of the United States. Love it. Love the inductees. Cyndi Lauper. Cyndi Lauper is someone who deserves a second look by a lot of people.
I agree.
If you only know her hits, they're great. As we learned on the cover song show, Girls Just Want to Have Fun is actually a cover. But her music is just there. It's good music. I don't care what you like. You can't ignore Cyndi Lauper. She was kind of in that vein. She was kind of the alternative person's Madonna at the time. You had Madonna, who was like your Taylor Swift of the time. And I don't know where Cyndi Lauper is probably more like what the female rapper, maybe the Doechii of her era, where she was just a little.
She had that little bit of punk with her. That look, and that edge. And I'll tell you, the opening Goonies song with her singing the Goonies song, and it's, oh my gosh, the nostalgia just hits so hard.
Yeah.
I mean, when I hear that, man, it just like takes me back. It's a good feeling.
It is. It's good.
And what's that slow jam she sang? Like
Time After Time.
Yeah.
Time After Time is just absolute
certified,
absolute banger. If you get a chance, she did a show some years ago. It's probably a long time ago, where a lot of people don't realize she's a phenomenal musician, right? So she's a pop star with kind of punk kind of look and aesthetic to her, at least for the time. And you kind of forget the fact or didn't realize that she's actually a really good musician and can sing live. I mean, you had in her day, they didn't have the auto tune, and she can just kill. So she has did a live show in 2007. Okay, so we're talking, coming on 20 years now. Cyndi Lauper and Friends, and so she's in Atlantic City. Has a bunch of people coming on. They're doing her songs, and it's contemporaries of the time. So I think Scott Weiland is in there.
Cool.
Shaggy is doing stuff, and you get to see how good of a musician she is, because there's nothing disguising it. It's not like a big production. It's just musicians on stage playing. So Cyndi Lauper and Friends, I'll link it up.
That's cool. Well, with that, as you're linking it, the thing that I appreciate is the artistry of when, art, you're not going to mistake somebody's art, their expression of their art. A true artist, when you see it, it's theirs. And her voice, I would say love it or hate it, because it is kind of nasally. It is kind of like, it has like a front end like flavor that either you're going to like or you don't.
Yeah.
But it's her. When you hear it, it's her. So that right off the bat is like artistry. And then, so that is something I appreciate about her. And I think that initially people didn't like was that nasally kind of whiny kind of, I don't know how to fully explain it, but just her sound, it stayed true.
And she didn't sound like other controlled people. Break. She has a controlled break in her sound, in her vocal, which is one of my favorite vocal capabilities. When an artist is pushing their voice to a point where it just kind of breaks, it cracks, but it's good. Like they have the ability to push that hard and be able to break. There's a Mariah Carey where she can hit these just, otherworldly high notes without breaking, and that's interesting.
Yeah.
But like I love when they push so hard that there's just a little break and it has that edge to it.
Yeah.
And Cyndi Lauper has that capability. When you see her live, she has just great vocal control, unbelievable ability to just come up with incredible melodies, like a Chris Cornell. So just uncanny. So awesome. I'm excited. She definitely deserves it. Soundgarden obviously deserves it. Rest in peace, Chris Cornell. And I did see on the Reddit threads in music, people talking about it. Whenever this happens, between the nominees and the award winners, people are always a little butthurt. And the Fish people were butthurt.
I bet.
Fish didn't get nominated. And so I went over, this is by no means the measure of things, but I went over to the Spotify just to see what kind of plays is Fish getting on their top tracks. And their top track, Farmhouse, 27 million plays on Spotify. Almost all of the other acts in the nominee list have at least one track in the billions.
Golly.
Okay. So it's a completely different game. So popularity isn't there.
Well, it's because the Fish is still at their festival playing the same loop in their track live right now in a, DMT induced jam.
Right. Right. And that's what the jam band people always say. You'll listen to a Grateful Dead or a Fish or, some things, and you'll be like, and they're like, well, you got to see them live. And I'm like, that's fine. That's fine. But, maybe the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is more about your entire impact, not just your market success, as indicated by the plays currently on Spotify, and your ability to perform live or otherwise.
The people watching at the Fish festivals, though, that's pretty high level. Like
you can get a good look at that by just going to a Dave Matthews or like a Bela Fleck. So you're going to get better music, and you're still going to get some patchouli white people with dreads tripping. So, but the argument from the Fish people was, well, they have a cultural impact. You may not know their music, but you know them. I'm like, I honestly, and maybe I'm a terrible music person, I don't know a Fish. I couldn't come up with a Fish song out of my head. I had to go look. That doesn't mean if I heard one, I go, oh, I know this song. I just don't know it's Fish.
Yeah.
They're not on that level. I'm sure they'll get inducted eventually, but they just have never had, even Grateful Dead have had a couple hit singles. I Will Get By. Fish has not. They're not. They're just not there. They are a niche, and jam band people, it's a niche.
Yeah.
You get your own Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
So there you go. I'm looking forward to watching that. It's always cool to see, just those kind of things where different bands are playing other bands' songs and that sort of stuff. So I'm looking forward to that. All right, the Wu-Tang. John, what's your relationship to the Wu?
Man, they were in the rotation in middle school and in high school for sure, and also just as they started going into their solo albums, just following along each of their own albums and tracks. So that they were a part of my upbringing. Their CD was in my CD binder, or handful of Wu-Tang.
36 Chambers.
Yeah,
first drop. Yeah, everyone's got that. That's canon. That is hip hop canon.
Yeah.
We could probably do a show at NPR for. I'll try. Maybe I'll link it up. But NPR did a whole series that lasted a few months, where they just went through what happened in hip hop in 1993. So, rock and roll has 1969. It's like a special year for rock and roll. It's kind of really when it transitioned from that pop, where we kind of let go of the Elvis, type of rock and roll and went full, what we consider classic rock, 1969 is, that year. Well, the equivalent in hip hop is 1993. And 36 Chambers was a part of that. Although released in 92, it
takes
often
time.
An album is the year later is really when it blows up. And that whole year, when you look at what was released, in 92 and 93, it's
kind of like getting a car. This is a 93. No, it's actually kind of 94.
Yeah. So it's that year. So Hulu, Hulu had a 3-season series called Wu-Tang, an American Saga. And it was recommended a couple shows ago. If you remember Kevin, our bartender homie, Kevin Stewart, he's like, because I was a current earworm on the X and Z show. AJ and I every week try and pick an earworm. What have we been spinning this week? And in that week, I was really listening to Liquid Swords, which is Jizza. So if you know the Wu-Tang, it was originally 8 members, became 9 when they added Master Killa in there, and so he's on that second album, Wu-Tang Forever. But so they had this 5-year plan where they're going to release the first album, and then everybody's going to have a solo album essentially, and they ran it like a business where Wu-Tang was a business, not a band, and you only one record label signed the Wu-Tang as an entity, and it has the members it does, but all the individuals could get their own record deals and under this umbrella. So it created this they really changed the game in terms of the business of music for a group. And so over the 5 years, they were trying to release solo albums, and then on year 5, they release for their second Wu-Tang album. And so one of my favorite in the even above all the albums, maybe not my favorite, the one I listen to the most is Jizza's solo album, Liquid Swords, which, come to find out, he was very intentional about it because it has every Wu-Tang member at the time on it. All 8 of them rap on Liquid Swords.
Nice.
So that was my earworm, and I was telling Kevin that. He's like, you should watch this show, Wu-Tang, an American Saga. I remember seeing ads for it when it first came out a year or 2 ago, but it's, I just didn't, just too busy, didn't get around to it. So I watched it, and it creates it's one, very nostalgic. You're going to love it if you listen to some Wu and hip hop at the time. Very nostalgic, really well done. And a couple of the actors, when you think of like Straight Outta Compton, where Ice Cube's son plays Ice Cube, spitting image, perfect. Like that's Ice Cube.
Yeah.
A couple of the actors, the actor that played Old Dirty, just spot on. Like he was very good. He was a very good Old Dirty Bastard. Like looked just like him. A couple other ones. There RZA, ironically, who's kind of the point. He's the focal. He's kind of the leader of the Wu-Tang Clan. He wasn't very spot on for RZA. Their Method Man was pretty bang on. He didn't quite have the perfect like Method Man speech impediment, which is really endearing and makes his rap really good.
Yeah.
But he rapped very well like him. And from what I can tell, these actors just for continuity, they actually do the rapping in the show so that the vocals sound the same as what they're talking. And they did a really good job. It's an interesting show. Not family friendly, obviously, but if you loved hip hop, you loved early 90s hip hop and the rise of hip hop, considering if you think of it in that context, that 1993 is to 1969 what rock and roll was for hip hop. So 93, that's the year. And so this is just an in-depth look at that and their rise and their hustle. And it's an interesting show. It's probably not perfectly well done. It has some pacing issues. And it brought up one thing that my wife and I struggled with is in the 3rd season, they did 3 special episodes where they basically put the characters into different characters and kind of this fantasy world. In one, they kind of go back and now we're in the 70s and you guys are all like pimps and we're going to run the story that way. And though I'm not a fan when shows do that, it just kind of breaks the thing. Like, I get maybe you're bored, you want to do something creative, but don't do a musical episode. Don't do I don't want to see a retro episode of, Breaking Bad where we're going to go back to the Old West.
Right.
Have you seen shows like that?
Yeah.
Where they do that? It
comes out of nowhere and it's like, what? You just lost me.
Like, I get it. You want to do that. You want to mix it up. You're bored. You're creative. But, it's kind of like going to a concert and they don't play any of their hits. You're like, bro,
come on.
What's the deal?
Yeah.
I'm out. You missed it. And so I'm kind of similar with Last of Us right now. If you guys watched Last of Us, did you watch Last of Us?
I got through, I think, the first season, and I need to pick it back up because apparently there's some stuff happening. Like this last episode really got
I don't know if I want to watch it anymore after the second episode, season 2. My wife and I are both like, well, I don't want to spoil it, but we're like, well, what's the point of watching it anymore?
Right.
And I don't want to give that away. But I get it. They're trying to be true to the source material, and it's important for the source material.
Right.
But not knowing the source material, other than I played Halo and I kind of understand.
Yeah, it's hard to make a movie off of a video game, I think.
So I don't.
Although I am waiting
curious if it works.
Legend of Zelda. Maybe we can make that work somehow.
But I'm curious if it works. So Wu-Tang and American Saga. If you like 90s hip hop, it's kind of a cool history, and it flows pretty well. It's on the Hulu. So there you go. Wu-Tang.
Sweet.
Wu-Tang forever. So I've been spinning lots of Wu-Tang. And it's funny. My wife was like, I don't know if I know much Wu-Tang. And turns out she does.
Yeah.
And you're constantly reminded of Wu-Tang tunes because the backing, score behind most of it is just redone melodies and samples and things from the Wu-Tang. You're like, and so it's about to start a Wu-Tang song, but it's just, it's done with like trumpets or something.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. But yeah, topic of the day. The last great comedy. I think we may have seen the last great comedy. We in our end of year predictions for 2025, one of the things I put out there is the death of the mid-budget movie, but more importantly, the death of the comedy. For many reasons, most of them are economic, and we're starting to see that. One thing we see right now is for movies to get big money, they have to be a global success, and comedy doesn't translate across cultures, right? So it's barely does British humor do well in America, and American humor doesn't do very well in we speak the same language. But a mid-budget movie, I looked this up. I try to figure out what qualifies as a mid-budget movie. It's that movie that's somewhere between like an indie flick, I think the movie I just watched, Freaky Tales, fantastic movie, definitely an indie flick, and a blockbuster. So it's probably somewhere between like maybe, the numbers I have in the notes are a few years old. So maybe somewhere between 7, 8, 10 million up to 60, 70, 80 million, definitely not 100 million. And that movie is tough to make. And nowadays it's going straight to streaming. And so the comedy is even harder to make with that kind of budget. And so what I think, people ask me, what do I think the funniest movie ever made was? Right now in 2025, I'm going to say it's The Other Guys. You've seen it, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing I always wonder, like, I would love to watch this movie again for the first time, because it's it's got so many little surprises and nuggets and just things that we've never really seen.
Yeah.
Right? Your take. I mean, Other Guys, you remember the first time you saw it?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I want to, man, there's a chance I may have. Oh yeah. I think we saw it together.
And it was one where I don't think we saw it in a theater.
Right. Like I want to say we watched it in your office or something. I don't. Yeah. Or at your house. I think.
Or maybe Matt's house. He had his theater. Maybe that's where we watched it.
Probably that's what it was. He had a little micro brew in his garage, and
so it came out in 2010, and I was kind of up to my neck in raising kids, so going out to movies was a challenge, and so that was probably the early days of the mid-budget movie starting to die in theaters. The Marvel was taking over in 2010.
What year did Blockbuster and Hollywood Video and the movie, the video rental store? When did that?
There's still one Blockbuster left.
Oh man,
it's in Oregon. It's in Bend, Oregon.
That's still pretty. There. There's something to be said about that.
And it's more of a tourist attraction than anything now. But
I bet it's the museum. Yeah. it's in the museum district.
Mm-hmm.
I just think there was something about it. I don't think that going through like your streaming services, I spend more time thumbing through the library of streaming services than
we're going to talk about that. That's part of it.
Than actually. But then going to the Blockbuster. that there was something about that. Like you had your new releases, and then when you went to go get them, they had 12 copies, and all 12 were gone. The shell of the video was there, and that was the hit, and then you would go ask the guy, hey, go check the return box and see if they returned it, because I'm looking for this movie, I want to watch it. And so I just, like, in this time frame, I feel like this was like the tail end of that, where
park that thought.
Okay.
Park that thought. I want to close the conversation.
Okay.
I want to make a note of the video store experience, because that's important, and that's kind of the other side of the coin of what's going on now. So the other guys, hilarious. Adam McKay, director and writer. Chris Henchy also writing on that. You know him from Anchorman, right? Talladega Nights. These are all the Will Ferrell hits with Adam McKay, either writing or directing or both. Step Brothers, obviously Anchorman 2, Daddy's Home, where Wahlberg and Ferrell are together, and Daddy's Home 2, both hilarious, but they just didn't have that hit. This is the last movie.
Yeah.
And when I say it's the last great comedy, it's the last great comedy that enough people saw that it's kind of part of our vocabulary, right? It's quotable. And I think that's a big component of it, the other guys. And so we don't see that anymore in streaming. Less of us have seen, a funny movie with it that's straight to streaming because of all that noise. So we'll talk about that, but I really want to go ahead.
Yeah. As you're talking, asking the take is, for me growing up through the years and in these generations or in these cultural, moments, they had the heroes of comedy going all the way back to like my parents and the SEC TV to the, Saturday Night Live, to the spinoffs of like the In Living Color and these, sketch comedies. And then stand-up comedy has always been a part of the art, the almost the theater side of the art of comedy. And that is a really raw, difficult way. But, I look back on these genres and these time periods, and I can think of the heroes of the comedy, me growing up and my favorites over the years. And then, now it's like with this movie, my take would be, if you like Will Ferrell and you haven't seen this movie, it's a must watch.
Yeah.
If you don't like Will Ferrell, I'm a little concerned about, maybe that's why you haven't watched it.
We probably can't be friends if you don't like Will Ferrell.
Let's start with that. But and so even almost like with the last great comedy, I'm kind of wondering now with where things are, where the Mount Rushmore faces of comedians of our kids' time. Like, who are they?
Well, stand-up is having a resurgence, it seems, as well. They're filling stadiums and garnering big paychecks.
But how easy is it to take a clip from a stand-up, like to get a stand-up clip and get his like joke bundled up in a 15-second moment?
And that's part of it. The distribution creation of a comedy show, even if you hit the road and you're doing stadiums, you don't need Taylor Swift with a dozen semis. You just need a bus with a few people on it, a couple openers, maybe a couple props on the stage. That's it. It's an easy, so that it's the middle class of entertainment is getting cut out. So it's got to be affordable, fast, transportable, or it's got to be global, blockbuster, massive. And so that's, it's a victim of this type of comedy. But to your point, there's kind of there's comedy movies that changed the game, right? Throughout, they changed what a comedy is. And so I think too, at least for Gen Xers, there's somewhere physical comedy kind of took over, in the 70s and kind of just some of the goofy stuff. But two movies that come to mind when I think of movies that changed comedy, that become like, and what gets us to the other guys. Number one is Caddyshack. Okay. Where prior to Caddyshack, you had to have physical comedy. You could have dialogue driven jokes and things like that. They were a part of it, but the physical comedy had to happen. So you think Richard Pryor in The Toy. It might have come after Caddyshack, but that type of stuff where
I haven't thought of that movie in forever.
There's funny dialogue and things like that, but it's just a lot of goofiness, or like It's a Mad World, one of the older ones, those types of things.
Yeah.
Physical comedy carried the movie.
Right.
And slapstick, you think like Airplane,
Naked Gun,
those types of movies. Yeah. So there was witty jokes in there.
For sure.
Caddyshack came in and had like The Godfather did for regular movies, in that, the lighting and the volume was more like real life. The conversations were real conversations. It wasn't like this enunciated stage acting.
Right. Yeah.
It was more like, it was more real. Where Caddyshack, although it had some goofy gags and things and like that, the bulk of the movie was carried by dialogue and story. And it really, to the point where it didn't really even have a plot. It was just a vignette of life at this golf course and some of the people in it. And it was just funny dialogue. And so that changed comedies, where you didn't have to do this physical stuff. You had to be better than that. You had to bring in some wit, and you had to bring in some jokes that you had to immerse into, almost like stand-up. Like stand-up came to the screen, and you had to follow on jokes. The next evolution came in the mid-90s. And I think There's Something About Mary.
Yeah. Your Ben Stiller, Jim Carrey. I mean, when you talk about physical comedy, mean, he was, golly, his animated movements and faces and.
Right. Yeah. This was, I want to say, refined raunch. You had meatballs, you had that.
Porky's.
You had Revenge of the Nerds, Porky's. You had that in the 80s, but it was more like slapstick raunch.
Sure.
Where this was like the jokes themselves.
Right.
Had took that, they took they stripped all the physicalness out of that, and the jokes themselves were at a level of we would have been embarrassed by in the 80s, and it became norm. And so I think that's a tent post, kind of this tent peg, tent post, milestone, pole, if you will, pole in comedy. Where now it took what started with Caddyshack dialogue and took some of the physical comedy of your Revenge of the Nerds, Meatballs, Porky's, and packaged it into a dialogue-driven movie that was very adult. And it was freaking hilarious at the time. I remember watching it. It was the funniest thing I'd ever seen. Like Luke couldn't breathe, kind of laughing. Something About Mary. And it was one that was on loop. Had the VHS, wearing it out in the apartment with my roommates in college. That was the movie to watch. And then Will Ferrell, Adam McKay, these guys came along and really refined all that stuff and just added layers. And the other guys, I think, is the peak of that type of comedy. Did you watch Something About Mary?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I want to go back and rewatch that. It was special.
Me too. It's been a while. The Dumb and Dumber for me was probably the most watched comedy for me. When it landed, I'll never forget. I was at a birthday party with my middle school buddy in seventh grade. Seventh grade, Dumb and Dumber. I mean, golly, it changed my life. And then
Dumb and Dumber. Yep.
Well, saw that so many times. And then, even before that, like the Ace Ventura was so quotable. Like just
wasn't it the same year?
Alrighty then.
Yeah. Like the Ace Ventura. Yeah. Both of them specifically. I think the second one is one of those rare things where the sequel's better than the original. They were able to refine it, tighten it up.
But before that though, like I would say maybe Eddie Murphy, like the Coming to America. On VHS, I think I may have watched that maybe the most, and that talk about quotable.
Yeah.
And then, there is something to be said about the, what is the genre of it? Like the buddy cop comedy, what you like at 48 Hours or like Lethal Weapon, and typically it's like a minority and a white guy, and the tension always plays into it a little bit.
Yep.
I think that kind of teed up this movie a little bit. And instead of them doing the token white guy, black guy thing, they did like the nerdy guy, good cop, bad cop kind of thing.
Well, it was always the, you think like Dragnet or 48 Hours. It was always the kind of the off the chain rule breaker cop and the guy the veteran who follows the rules, like that was always that kind of model. Lethal Weapon, 48 Hours, even Beverly Hills Cop. That was it. And so they kind of just double clicked into that. They had, not only was the rule, he was like the rule. And that's his whole, his persona is, I am so strict, even way more than what's his name? Yeah. Than in Dragnet, which I think they're remaking.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Dan Aykroyd's character is and so he was way more, just super, super tight, wore a suit, calculator, that kind of thing. And they just leaned into that archetype and made fun of it. And then Mark Wahlberg's character, they made fun, same thing, kind of
like the hero,
but not just, instead of just being like the rebel cop, he's just a bad cop.
Yeah.
That wants it too much.
Yeah.
So they lean into that. So it's right on. They platform off that. It's a buddy cop. It's got physical comedy. It's got dialogue. But here's the thing that I think makes it special. Like a good stand-up comedy, especially a long form, when you watch someone who's doing a 40 to 60 minute set, I think of Dave Chappelle when they dropped those two and then a second set on Netflix. 3 of those 4 stand-up routines from Dave Chappelle are some of the best stand-ups I've ever seen. And it has this connectivity through the storyline where there's kind of a running gag or movement that keeps popping up, and it gets funnier every time because you're bringing the audience in on the joke. And so the next time you hit that same joke or connect to it, it's even funnier, and you get this buildup. Where the other guys, I don't think there's very many, if any, scenes apart from the opening scenes, or any time that it's the first time we have, the cold open with the rebel cops jumping off the building, and then going into where we Hoyts and Gamble start to emerge, and we follow them. I don't think there's a single scene in the movie where there isn't a running gag that starts or keeps going. The list of running gags, I want to watch it. Next time I watch it, I'm going to have my notes out, and I'm going to track the running gags, because I think there's very few, if any, scenes where there isn't a running gag, right? So like in the show notes, I linked to a Reddit thread where people are talking about that, and it makes those jokes even funnier because you just keep diving into it. Like you can probably think of one right now.
Like the gun.
Like the gun. Okay, so his gun gets taken away, and he gets a fake wooden gun, and then he gets a rape whistle, and it keeps running. And then later he has to go back and get his gun. Gator needs his gat, and the whole thing is just hilarious. And it sets this. I wonder if they challenged themselves to do that, or if it happened organically. If I ever get a chance to interview Adam McKay, that's what I want to ask him. Like, was that intentional from the start? Did you want to connect all the scenes with running jokes?
I'd hope so. I want to, like, it's just, I think that's something that carries stand-up comedy. You tell the story, and then as you're telling other stories, you say the sentence or the thing that takes you, like what you're saying, right back to it. And there's something very witty about that.
It hits harder. It makes the joke funnier. Like Dirty Mike and the boys keep popping up in there. He keeps, Gamble keeps trying to give Hoyts gifts, and you're just not getting it. Gamble's Little River Band obsession and his music. The fact that Terry Hoyts thinks everything is about, drug cartels.
Right.
Gamble's wife is hot, and he's constantly downplaying it.
Totally.
The fact that every hot chick in the movie is infatuated with Gamble. The fact that Hoyts, you keep learning about artistic things he's learned just to be sarcastic, dancing and singing, and
like being in the bar and singing harmony with those old guys, like an old Sailors tune.
And the water, when they go to Urshan's office, we keep getting water, and they keep getting bribed out of going, Terry keeping, kind of basically hitting on Alan's wife.
Yeah.
of the Fresh Start stuff.
Yeah.
Let's see. His Prius is a recurring character that keeps getting just beat up.
So funny. They run over the cocaine, and then like one of the people walk by it and just kind of rub their fingernail across it and give it a little sniff.
Bob walking into scenes at inappropriate times to try and discuss, basic things. Not only is it a joke, but it's important to the plot point too.
What about one of my favorite scenes in that movie is at the funeral, the whisper fight.
That is just brilliant.
And just Michael Keaton
he steals every scene he's in. Scene he's in.
He comes in there like, guys, knock it off. Like, he's like yell whispering. And then the lady walks by and they all stop and they're like, "Man, I'm sorry, our condolences." And then they go right back to yelling at each other.
She's brilliant. Yeah, and like they're struggling to relate to him, calling him Captain Gene, and that keeps recurring. His TLC references throughout the movie, like he keeps quoting a TLC song throughout the movie, and it's just deadpan delivery and hilarious, and yeah, love it. His second job at Bed Bath & Beyond keeps coming up. Like every scene in that movie has a recurring gag. So next time I watch it, I'm making notes.
And one of the things that I think makes it really clever with what you're saying, you're spot on, is from the get-go, I get the sense as a viewer of like, they're going to let you know, like we're not trying to make this like meaningful, endearing buddy cop comedy. We're intentionally making fun of buddy cop comedies in this from the get-go. So you don't need to try to buy into it in that way, like Turner and Hooch, oh man, like there's so many feelings of it's trying to be a serious kind of buddy cop movie. And so in this, I think even they set the tone when, the hero cops, jump off the roof. It's like, we're going to just kind of just crush this from the get-go and go along this wild, kind of slapsticky. That's the slapstick side of it, is it's like, we're going to make fun of the things. Okay. So like, we're not trying to be a serious buddy cop comedy. We don't want you to buy into it being a buddy cop comedy. We want you to realize we're going to let you in on, we're making fun of buddy cop comedies and we're just going to like make fun of it the whole way through. Even like the bad guys are just so cheesy. That's the slapstick side of it. So that's what it's like a nod to the old slapstick 80s films to me.
Yeah. What they're doing, and one great structure for jokes that I really appreciate, and some comedians really make a living off of this type of joke, where a lot of jokes are helping you visualize something or understand something, and so you immerse into the something, and it's already funny, and then they double click and give even more detail on it. And that's kind of how they do the characters here, where they're taking the typical buddy cop character and taking all the things that are standard about them and then just double clicking into it. Not only is Terry Hoyt's kind of like a crazy cop, we'll go into it. He's just bad at it. He's kind of incompetent at it. Not only is Gamble like the straight man, he's super straight at it. He wants to be, and he tells that story. I want to be an accountant for Law and Order. Be placed somewhere really safe, Then you look at his background, they just double click into the gator thing and just make it.
Oh my gosh!
It's just, that's what they do. They take a joke and then they just keep go another layer deep, another layer deep, another layer deep, and that's some of my favorite types of joke, whether it's in stand up or in a movie, where you just that was funny, and now it's even funnier. Now it's funny again. So,
yeah, and one of my, I was wondering if you're going to go down this path, but that's what you just pointed out is a really good point about that movie. Like, one of the things I really appreciated about Conan O'Brien as a late night host is he was just straight up upfront about the poor production quality. He made fun of the things that they were doing and in turn made fun of himself. And that was probably my favorite part about the show, was every time they would do something in the crowd, their writers would come out with these goofy little characters to say or do something. He's already like, guys, like, like, this is the best we can do. Like, what are we doing? And so it's like letting you in on making fun of already making fun of it, the production quality, or laughing at
themselves,
laughing at ourselves. And there's a hint of that with that movie, a hint of it. I wouldn't say that that's all of it. I think
they don't go too far. Like when I think of that type of humor, that's kind of Jim Gaffigan's, his 80% of his jokes are making fun of himself.
Yeah.
To be honest, it gets tiring after when it's too much. You go too much. Like, okay, I get it. You think you're fat. Cool. But it is got this stand-up vibe to it. But at the same time, it's super rewatchable. Partly because it's so quotable, and knowing those jokes are coming often makes some of them funnier, and you see the different layers in there. If you get a chance, find the unrated cut of it. It's funny because one thing you kind of see how, and if you can watch extra scenes and how they write jokes, a lot of times they'll say a joke, but they've said that joke with a bunch of different punchlines, and then they take the best ones and put them in the movie. So when the detective is breaking down the list of things they found in the car after the soup kitchen, we found a used condom, we found this, like in the uncut one, dude, he goes on for like 4 minutes.
It looks like human lips,
and it's ridiculous. And so it's fun to kind of see how Adam McKay works with his actors. They keep telling jokes. You've probably seen it like with Talladega Nights, when he's doing like, any of those jokes, he's probably, they're ad-libbing, they're improvising and just kind of clicking into just all these non sequiturs. And I love a non sequitur joke.
Oh my gosh. That is one of that non sequitur is a word that really makes that movie. Like that, I would say that is a top 3 descriptive word of the type of humor in that movie.
And I love that. I love it because it's mentally engaging, which makes things funnier, because you have to be like, what doesn't make any sense? And that's why it's funny. Right. Jersey Boys, you're going to get Jersey Boy tickets. What? And then it makes sense later because now you're getting Knicks tickets, now you're, and so Mamma Mia, and so it's funny. Or the Russian glacial water, like that's just non sequitur, but then they just double click into it and go farther, and so it's super quotable, and it makes me think. I think it's in the pantheon of quotable comedy movies for me, where like around my house and people close to me. This is kind of part of my vocabulary. The two that have always been there for as long as I can remember are Spinal Tap and Caddyshack. Rarely is and I have ADHD. So
me too.
The words you hear coming out of my mouth are a small selection of what's already been loaded up in my head that I just filtered out. And almost every conversation I'm in, thoughts pop in my head of Spinal Tap quotes and Caddyshack quotes, but mostly Spinal Tap quotes. And and now it's starting to become something with the other guys where it's like, Gator needs his gat, like that keeps coming up. Or when I need anything, it's like, Gator needs his coffee cup. It's like, so that it's just become, canon in our house. But Spinal Tap has always been one there, which brings up the question: did you get into the mockumentaries?
Yeah, I love mockumentaries.
Yeah,
I love them, man. They're so good. I love it. That's one of my favorite type of comedy movie is a mockumentary.
And the Christopher Guest, your things like The Office, Parks and Rec, those shows that
I love The Office.
I'm huge. This is their grandfather. It's Spinal Tap. It's the first mockumentary. And for those who aren't familiar with Spinal Tap, so Christopher Guest, you may have heard some of his other ones where that same crew, it's a bunch of people, the same people are in the movies playing different characters. Eugene Levy is in almost all of them. Obviously Christopher Guest is in almost all of them, but Spinal Tap's the first one. I don't know the order, but they did A Mighty Wind, which is a mockumentary about a traveling bluegrass band. They did Best in Show, which is a mockumentary, about a dog show. It looks like a documentary. And if you didn't know any better,
you could fall trapped to thinking
if you could turn back time and nobody ever heard of this, and I put Spinal Tap on, at first you'd think it's an actual documentary. And if you're not good at understanding humor, you might go a long way through the movie before you realize it's not real. And so, there's that. Best in Show. Waiting for Guffman is about like a community theater in a small town.
The reviewist or the critic is coming, and
it is a brilliant idea they came up with. And I'm sure there's a lot of kind of improv based in that, and to the point where Spinal Tap, some of their music, they've done concerts, because they actually are musicians. They played the music in Spinal Tap. They played the music in A Mighty Wind. And so I remember one of my favorite Spinal Tap homages, if you will. So they do a song in the movie called Big Bottom.
Oh my gosh, right? Yeah.
And the entire band plays bass.
Yeah.
So their two guitarists are playing bass, and their bass player is playing bass, and their keyboard is playing bass keyboard. And so in that band, to make it funny, as they're playing a song, they're like on bass, and they go through it. So you remember Live Aid from like 1988 or something like that, where they did a concert like 4 continents. So it was like U.S., Africa, Europe, and then like Australia. And it was happening, basically throughout an entire 24-hour period. Bob Geldof did this thing to raise money to help fight AIDS. And they redid it in 2008. It was called Live 8, if you remember that. Very important show because it was the last time Pink Floyd played together, all 4 real members. They actually brought in, what's his name? I'm blanking. They're kind of estranged. Other lead man wasn't playing with them. They played 4 songs together.
Yeah.
But one thing it did, they brought out Spinal Tap. I think they were at the American venue, which was in New York or somewhere, or DC. They bring out Spinal Tap, and they're going to play Big Bottom. And so Spinal Tap's out there, and he introduces the band on bass, and then he goes on bass, MCA, and so every bass player that's at the venue ends up on stage, and he's introducing bass players. He's introducing bass players for like 5 minutes until there's 30 bass players on stage, and they're all playing the Big Bottom riff.
Oh, that's awesome.
If you're a bass player, you know that riff. Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah.
You have to learn it. And so hilarious. If you ever get a chance, watch Spinal Tap at Live 8.
The amplifier scene is my favorite, and
everyone knows
all
that.
the time. If something's turned up too loud, or like I want something to go harder, I always say turn it up to 11. And it's weird. Very rarely do anybody get it, And then when people do get it, they like give me that nod. Like,
that's how I find my people, by making Spinal Tap jokes. From that scene, the one that I always say all the time from that scene is, he's looking at a guitar that's still new and it has the tag on it, and he goes, still got the old tagger on it. And so we say at our house all the time when something's brand new, still got the old tagger on it. Don't even touch that. Don't even look at that one. Like that one's part of our vocabulary. So so you can't really dust for vomit. I'm not about to do 12 minutes of freeform jazz exploration in front of a festival crowd. Like it's like, if you gotta see it.
The Stonehenge mismeasurement. Golly, that's so good.
It's a danger of being trampled by a dwarf. So just hilarious. That's quotable. And like I said, the other guys has become one of the quotables for me. Like it's all in there. And in Caddyshack, of course, too, straight in the lumberyard, whenever I'm at a store and I start rattling off things I need, that Rodney Dangerfield scene always comes up. Give me 2 of those, 3 of those, 6 of those, give me those box of those orange balls, give me a box of those naked lady tees, like all kinds of stuff. Just hilarious and fantastic. And obviously the Cinderella boy, that whole scene,
so good.
The Gunga Gunga.
Yeah.
It's so good. And so, but back to just the what happens to the comedy movie. Will we see a comedy movie like this again that gets this kind of distribution? Like, I think they'll still make movies like this, but will enough of us see them to where it becomes kind of a cultural thing? Right? There's probably been movies that are as funny or pretty close to this that I haven't seen or you haven't seen, right? That have gone straight to streaming. You just haven't seen it, right? Yeah. Or I think of one that's pretty funny. Again, Netflix movies have always been hurt by them, but Mark Wahlberg has one called Spencer Confidential. Yeah. And it's very similar in this. It has kind of recurring gags, a lot of non sequitur. It's got a funny plot point. It's kind of a take on a buddy cop movie. I recommend it all the time as a comedy that a lot of people haven't seen. I think, if it got this kind of budget and released at that time when we were still going to the movies or maybe buying DVDs or renting DVDs. Spencer Confidential might have been one of those movies that kind of got that kind of a hit. Highly recommend. I'll link it up. Another one that's similar is it's funny. It's a similar title. It's The Nice Guys. So that's Russell Crowe and Ryan Gosling, and it's a buddy cop movie that's hilarious, not family friendly, but it's drier. It's not as immediate that it is a comedy. So if you didn't expect it, and I think I had that problem when I first saw it and the ads came out, because I'm gonna admit, Ryan Gosling, I'll watch a Ryan Gosling movie. He's up there with like a Brad Pitt or Tom Hanks
awesome.
or Tom Cruise, where like, dude can do anything at this point. Like he's really good. I'll see a movie just on the weight of him, and he was in it. And they're private detectives in this case, and they're getting into tomfoolery and this sort of thing. It's more plot driven.
Is it more actiony?
More actiony, more plot driven. You could have, and like I said, with the original marketing, I didn't think it was straight up a comedy movie, but in reality, it is mostly a comedy movie. And I think that's this is the new breed of comedy that we're going to be seeing, is stuff like The Nice Guys, like Spencer Confidential. This came out. Nice Guys came out in 2016. I think. Let me see. Do they call it a comedy on IMDb? Yeah, they call it a buddy cop, bumbling detective, slapstick, action, comedy, crime, thriller. It's more dynamic. It's got more going on. But what makes it rewatchable for me is the comedy. It's pretty freaking funny. But a lot of people didn't see it. And so to go back to what you were talking about, the video store experience, movie discovery has gotten really hard, just like music discovery, right?
Yeah.
There's not someone to talk to, which is, again, why I like this podcast. I want to get recommendations. If you don't get to spend enough time around creative people and hear their recommendations, you might just be scrolling through the streaming services looking for it. And like you said, how many times have you ever done this where you scroll, finally settle on something, and then halfway through it, you just give up?
Yeah. The majority of the time.
So you abandon a movie all the time.
Well, what I'm saying is I spend more time trying to find and look for something to watch than actually watching the things. And I give up on watching the things because I get tired of scrolling. I'm like, I'm just going to leave my TV on the title page of the streaming service with the recommendations and the things. Yeah. And I'm just going to, it's on. The streaming title page spends more time on my TV than the actual streaming of the content.
Right.
And look, yeah, as we're talking too, I had a thought that was like hanging with me. And this got brought back to me in the strangest of ways. It was I'm trying to hang in there with the highest value of our social media, of like, that's the thing, is the social media. And I feel so old talking about the things of it.
Right.
That it carries things in these short blips, and there's the sharing of it. When I see something funny or meaningful, then I'm sending it to you. And what that to me is a replacement of something that I think that we need. And what that is not just the connection of the human spirit. And that's one of the values of like the comedies, or like the video store, is the guy behind the counter, the people in there, the frustration of the videos being gone, picking up the pack of Twizzlers. You're doing the thing in there. It's the connection of the human spirit through audience. Jokes are funnier. When I watch comedies by myself, I don't find myself laughing. I'm much more desperate to give away these cheap laughs as an audience. And I found that when I observed it, when I took my youngest son to go see the Minecraft movie.
Right.
And that was a spectacle for me, because I'm like, ugh, Like, but it was funny though. There were moments where I think it gave nod to like the Napoleon Dynamite, which, you know, in this argument of, well, we see a great comedy like this before. I mean, we got to give some props to the Bill Hader of the, you know, Napoleon Dynamite and the Nacho Libres of the comedies. Those are, and you know, Jack Black, awesome. And so, you know, it was like the chicken jockey, you know, and now it's become a stupid thing. But like
Jared Hess, you meant.
Yeah, why did I say Bill Hader? Jared Hess, my bad.
Yeah, he did those 2 movies and then just dipped.
Yeah, but he's got a part within Minecraft, right? Like he helped do Minecraft.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but he did this. He created his own genre, like a new type of movie.
Right. Yeah. Like
it was great. They were great movies, comedy. Like just kind of dry.
Yeah.
You know, Nacho Libre and Napoleon Dynamite are kind of very similar.
Very similar.
It's definitely love-hate. Like there's people that I don't get it. Stupidest thing I've ever seen. I love him. And he did another one that I watched and it just wasn't as good. Did a similar one, but I think it was just too meta. Carry on. Yeah. Sorry.
So no. I mean, so to me, like that is part of the experience of, you know, going with your buddy or, you know, going to the basement, like you're laughing at things that you wouldn't laugh at if it was just you, you know, and you're just kind of more of an observer of the comedy than a participant of the audience in the comedy. And I find that because I do spend a considerable amount of my time in front of an audience. And in that environment, I find myself realizing how cheap the audience can be with the lamest of laughs. I can say the dumbest stuff that isn't even clever. I mean, it's like dad joke goes a long way, or the pun goes so far with an audience than if I, you know, by myself and I catch it. So like
laughter's contagious.
It is.
Yeah.
We want to feel it. We want to laugh. It's that joy of it. And so, you know, sharing it is where I find myself getting the laughs. Like I'm chuckling, sharing something because I'm thinking, oh man, they're going to get it. Like, and they're going to laugh.
Because you're laughing with them. Yeah.
Right. But not really. Like
a little bit,
but not like this. Not like this.
No, I think there's 2 things there. The community viewing experience with people makes things funnier, scarier, etc. But also the commitment to watch. You know, there's not much commitment involved in scrolling through streaming, watching. You can bounce out it. But if I drove to the store, walked around for 20 minutes, picked out a movie, paid for it, get home, watching it. Damn it, I'm finishing that thing.
Yep.
Right? I'm going to watch it. And I'm going to watch it with more attention. Of course, we didn't have the smartphone with us prior to about 2007 anyway.
There to distract you.
You know, then it really started to take over. And so you end up scrolling on your phone and you're not tuned in. You know, so watching movies, like I have a nice setup at my house. And so that's the one thing I really spoil myself with. I have a nice audio system surround, you know, I don't have a crazy nice TV. I mean, big TVs are cheap now. But it's hard to have people over to watch a movie. So I've tried that. What if we get together at my house and watch a movie? Like you have to really work hard to make, hey, we're going to watch this movie, you know, put your phone away, you know, let's immerse.
Let's not start up these side conversations about last weekend and what happened at the ball game. Like, can we watch the movie together?
When you walk into a theater, you can't talk. You're not going to
do any of that stuff.
Yeah, especially if you go to a good theater where they're going to keep an eye on that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's different. So the commitment, it's easy. It's too easy to stop watching the movie. There's just no commitment, and we tend to watch things by ourselves now, whether we're watching on a smaller device or even on our TV at home. So the comedy, you know, and just movies in general we're consuming them differently. And so I think that's one of the biggest impacts here on comedies, where they're good when we all watched them, or at least most of us watched them, or most of the people in my circle watched them because they get a life outside of them. But when I watch Spencer Confidential, think it's funny, and I tell people to watch it, nobody watches it. And if we haven't all watched it within the same amount of time, even if we did all watch Spencer Confidential, it's not as memorable because we're not reminding each other about it, but we're constantly reminding each other about the other guys. We constantly remind each other about Caddyshack because we quote those little lines and they just have this life. And that's what I miss. And that's what I'm not sure we're ever going to see again. If things continue as they are, how do we fix it? Should we fix it? What do you think?
Oh man, I feel like it. What it boils down to for me is the need to fight for the connection of human spirit, because I feel like this might be a weird take and it might be a conversation for another day, but I feel like that's what we're in danger of losing, and that's what we are butting up against right now is a pseudo. It's fooled us into thinking that we're connecting, and we're not.
Yeah. Are we learning to connect in a different way? That's my favorite and most recommended book that nobody's ever going to read because it's 700 pages and it's super deep and heavy, but it's a book that just has an impact on everything I do, basically, in terms of the way I think creatively about the future in my work, in my personal life. And the book is The Empathic Civilization by Jeremy Rifkin. And he traces the history of how humans have empathized with each other. And it's important and what triggers that switch or that extra layer of empathy where, to shorten it and to kind of lean into what you're saying and give some hope. I want to give hope. Initially we were in tribes, right? We lived in our own little area in a tribe, and we only empathized and related to the people in our tribe to the point where we were essentially frightened of people in other tribes because we didn't see them, didn't know them. Maybe they spoke a different language, looked slightly different or whatever. They were kind of the enemy. So our circle of empathy and the way we had to connect with our what's called mirror neurons, the community, was smaller. And then we developed technologies that allow us to annihilate space and time, and that is in the form of written word. And we could empathize a little bit more. And so cities started to develop in agrarian economies. And the amount of people that we said, we're all citizens of this city. We speak the same language. We write in a similar way. We all take place in this economy of the city with the farms around it, that sort of thing. So we leveled up but there was friction to get to that. There was probably wars. There was probably, there's people thinking, well, this is the end of all things. Religions would speak doom to it. And then we developed ways to have transportation and to connect with people at an even larger scale when we got a printing press and steam power. And so now we're empathizing across an entire nation, so the British Empire started to expand. So, and again, that created frictions as, between people who could read, people who couldn't read, and power struggles and all that. And at the same time, people were saying, this is the end. I don't know how we're going to survive this. The kids today are a mess. I don't know how we're going to survive this. They would say the same thing. And then we had the broadcast ability first through like just the telegraph, and then eventually radio and TV. We could broadcast to many. And now we could, in real time, communicate essentially across the globe by the time all the dust settled there. But it was a one-to-many, basically. The people that controlled the broadcast could communicate, but the average person couldn't. We were just consumers. We consumed TV, consumed radio, and that changed everything. And the energy system and transportation with airplanes and trains, all that changed how we interact. And two things come about with all of those. Everyone says, well, we're going to have world peace. And some people say this is the end every time that happens. And the same thing now with what's happening with the internet and new media, and now new energy and new transportation. We're in that transition period where it's chaos. And again, people are doing what we've always done in this transition period. People are saying this is going to bring about world peace. And other people are saying this is the end. I don't know. And not Jeremy Rifkin, Clay Shirky predicted at a keynote I went to at South by Southwest in 2010 or 2011. He said, based on what we've seen in history, I predict we're going to have about 50 years of chaos. So us and our kids are living through this transition period where we're learning how to essentially speak a new language and empathize with each other at global scale in real time to feel each other's pain. And it's terrifying because we don't know how to freaking do it. Is it bad? I don't know. Is it good? I don't know. Like the Zen master said, we'll see. But we want what we used to have, where you could only have that community in presence. You had to go to your friend's house. And now our sons are communicating on video games, and it's different. And they're struggling because we're struggling too. We don't understand it. They're growing up in a reality we don't understand because we didn't grow up in it. And so I get that. I think the community and through it all, what Rifkin says and through what science says is, we talk about our core instincts, and I'm talking a lot here. I'm sorry, but I'm very passionate about this.
No, that's great.
Our core instincts is human. He breaks down all the core instincts that different philosophers and religions said we had. The Judeo-Christian, Muslim kind of worldview was the core thing of human is that you're evil, and we have to restrain that. Your psychologists like Freud would say the core thing is you want sex. The core thing is different depending on where you are, or blank slate theory, tabula rasa, or whatever our instincts are. Apart from just your initial survival, I need to eat, I need to not die physically. What's the primary drive? What's the most important instinct that humans seem to have? And what he says is beyond that, the strongest instinct we have is to be connected to each other, to have community. And so that's why this hurts right now, because that's, apart from just everyday survival, the most core instinct that we have as humans is being renegotiated in evolution as we create things. So we don't know what the fuck is happening. So it's scary.
Yeah. Like you were right on the edge of, at the end there, of the word play.
Mm-hmm.
Where I think that at the heart of that is where beautiful community begins. Like it begins and ends, like in play. And where, competition, is a part of it, but some ugly things come from that, of like, me versus you on a scoreboard on a field. But play more around the creative side of things, where you're bantering, and a huge part of the secret sauce in that is humor.
Yeah. You're right on. We can all connect on that.
Yeah.
So yeah, he brings that up. He quotes Schiller, who says, I'm going to butcher this quote verbatim. It's on my website because one of my favorite quotes, and it's, man is only fully human when he plays. It's the most important thing we can do that separates us from the animals, is that we play, or we recreate, or we recreate. It is how we connect. It's the most important connection we have. So when we go to that, our strongest drive, apart from immediate survival, is to connect. The way we connect differently than animals is we play. All those other things are secondary, and they come into being when we aren't playing. We're not recreating. We're not sitting down for a meal together. We're not sitting down watching a movie together. We're not talking. We're not walking. We're not experiencing, and just being together and trying to enjoy.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing.
Yeah.
And we're trying to figure out how to do that right now, and sharing. There's nothing wrong with it. Sharing TikToks on Instagram is one way to do it. Let's keep doing it. We got to figure this out.
Yeah. Just thinking of going back to like one of my favorite comedies of all time, and never forgetting when I saw it, where I saw it. I was in San Antonio at an Embassy Suites. We had an adjoined 2-room hotel. It was my buddy's birthday in middle school, and we rented on the, SpectraVision, the Dumb and Dumber, not the other stuff on SpectraVision,
right?
But so we watched Dumb and Dumber, and we had pizza, and we were, we had the fold out couch. We're jumping on the bed. We're watching it. We're laughing it. We're hearing stuff we shouldn't hear. We're seeing stuff we shouldn't see. We were hiked up on Mountain Dew and candy, and then, we opened presents, and after that, we're outside in the parking lot. He got a sweet remote control car, and we got a little board. The trash of it made a little ramp up the curb, and it had like that was like the good old days with comedy. And we were quoting that movie. We immediately watched it like the following weekend. We had to go watch it again, and it just became a part of our culture and our childhood and our upbringing. It's part of our language.
So it's what's next. How do we do what's next? And that's what we're trying to figure out. How do we play together in that? That's kind of a low common denominator. As long as you have the language skills and mental ability to sit down with some people, watch a movie, that's pretty low. We can all get around that. I mean, obviously the most important one is to sit around and have a meal together. Everyone needs to do that. Everyone can do that. Everyone has to. That's the most important context for play for humans. But watching a movie that we can just all laugh at, it isn't too hard to watch. You don't have to be thinking real hard about plot twists and stuff like that. It's the comedy. And it is kind of going away, or do we just have to have dudes in tights with capes, superheroes fighting and green screen? Is that all we have left?
I think part of my take in what that question is that I'm at a point where I'm trusting that, this idea of the human spirit is very resilient. We found our way through the dark ages where I'm trusting this next generation and the next generations, they're going to figure it out. I don't need to be the old disgruntled, grumpy guy complaining about it all the time. Like, I'm seeing it. They got to find their footing. They need people like us to be able to say, y'all got this. Like, it
should be there. We have enough resources. The clamoring and fighting and struggling for resources.
It's all there.
Book, that's what he's talking about. That's driving everything right now. And there's a concept called an extinction burst, where when something is about to go away, it gets its most noisy, or it seems to be, super prominent and take over. You think of like, how a 2-stroke engine works. Like it operates at its best. It puts out the most power just before it explodes, when the mix of air and fuel and oil is just right. But if you go just a little bit beyond that, boom, it blows up. And so capitalism seems to be in an extinction burst right now. I mean, the wealthiest people in corporations, there's not much left for them to gobble up. And so the people are kind of waiting around. And that's what's been driving everything globally right now is capitalism. We're in this tremendous shift right now. Everyone's catching up to America. And so we should be living the Star Trek reality. We could live that right now, but we all have to connect and decide we're going to be okay with each other and our differences, differences in religion, and not try to get after each other for other reasons, not trying to get after each other because we don't have the resources and we're fighting for them. We're in a post scarcity. There's no scarcity anymore. It's just by design, the scarcity, because the capital needs to create scarcity to make money. But there's enough food, there's enough energy for everybody to live a great life right now. And we have to figure that out, because what we're doing with AI and robots, it should free us up. We should be working less. We should be working way less, not working harder, and we should be able to enjoy that play. And that's the future I look forward to. Maybe it's pie in the sky, whatever, but that's what we should be doing. Yeah. So anything short of hoping for that and trying to move towards that is stupid in my mind. Yeah. So just trying to, I know the reality today is get resources, acquire money. And I feel that pain, and I have to do that for my family. And that's just the current reality that we're dealt. But man, hopefully my kids or my grandkids get to that post-scarcity reality where they can just play, and we can get art, and we can do art and those sorts of things.
Well, in the wise words of one of the greatest other comedies of all times, greatest comedy of all time, of Wild Stallions say, just be excellent to each other.
Be excellent to each other. And that's a good ender right there.